Wood chips and black steel. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to look at this 1905 Ithaca a little more close up. We're going to look at the wood stock itself, the buttstock in particular. The forearm is in remarkably good shape. Doing any refinishing on that is going to be a fairly simple process. It wasn't messed with much in its history. The checkering is in really good shape, so all I have to do is point that up and make that look pretty at the end. So this, we're going to handle that way towards the end of the restoration. This buttstock, however, is where all the story lies right now. It's where the history is, and I want to really spend this video talking a little bit about that. This story reveals itself. This story talks about the condition of the gun and sort of what it went through and how it was used. And we're doing a restoration, so technically all I got to do is do the repairs and make this thing pretty again. But this, you have to remember, belongs to a family. It's been in the same family since the gun was new. So if I were to simply erase the story and not record that story for the family, for future generations, then it all just goes away and nobody knows. And in a good restoration, we really want to capture the story almost as much as we want to do the restoration itself. We stripped, the last video, we stripped the finish off, and I was having or struggling to understand why somebody would have gone through that work to put that finish or put that next layer of finish, shellac or varnish, whatever it truly was, onto this thing. It didn't make sense to me, especially because the forearm was in such original condition. It didn't make sense to me that they did that. Matter of fact, they even sanded away a good portion of the checkering. Now, fortunately, most of it is still visible. I'm going to have to recreate it a little bit, but most of it's still visible, so I can trace those lines and recreate this. But when I got all the finish out, I knew that there were cracks. There's a crack here, there's a crack on this side, and there's a crack right up the middle. And I'll take a couple close-ups and show you those here as well. But I was curious, you know, why would you go through all this? They erased the panel. There's a pointed panel. I can still see remnants of it. There's a good part of that panel that still shows here, so I can use that and replicate its location, its position, as well as I've got that 1906 that I've shown you a couple times. Anyway, so I'm wondering, why is it that this somebody in the gun's past put that finish on, and then as I was getting ready to do the next part of the repair, it all occurred to me. It all presented itself to me. And this crack that I thought was just a crack was actually not a crack. This thing somehow was literally broken right off. And when I was getting ready to try and discover or figure out how I was going to repair this whole piece started to come off. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of interesting. So when we take it off, there's a nail that was used to put this piece back onto the main stock. I don't see any evidence of any glue. I just don't see it. It doesn't mean it wasn't used. I just don't see any evidence of any kind of a glue being used. And it's all pretty much down to clean wood. You can see the brad, and the brad itself is starting to poke out right at the top. So they didn't even try to hide the brad. They just literally put this piece back in place. Let's see if I can reproduce this. Nailed it there, put the finish over, sanded it down, matched, blended it, whatever they did, and then sanded over it and put the new coats of finish on. That's beginning to make sense to me. I'm beginning to understand what it is that that led to this work being done on this gun stock. This one here on this side, it's a good sized crack, but it ends right about here. So there's no evidence that this one actually broke off, but it is loose. It is ready to come off. So we're going to have to, in the process of restoring this, we're going to have to pull this apart, try to get any of that oil or finish or anything that got in there, get that cleaned out. I don't want to break it off. I want to use what's here. That's whatever wood fibers are here keeping this attached. I want to make sure that stays intact, and then we'll add probably going to add epoxy, and then try to get this squeezed up. So that is the update on this. That is what I'm now going to end up fighting with or working with to try and get this thing so that it looks like it did. When we look at the rest of the gun stock, you know, it is not remarkable. There's not a really beautiful piece of wood, but it's a nice piece of walnut. We see lots of dents, lots of dings. I am curious as to why these dents would be so linear, so sharp. It's almost like somebody banged it on something. You see these everywhere. There's several of these. Some of them are probably 2,000 or 3,000 deep, 4,000 deep, and they go all the way around this thing. I've shown you before that this toe was damaged. Don't know. I mean, this thing I'm pretty convinced lived a pretty active and tough life, and this side over here doesn't have quite the level of dings and issues with it. But when we get ready to do this, my first repair is going to be to get this piece glued back on. I want to try and match it as close as I can. I do plan, and we'll talk about this in the next video when I actually do the work, I do plan to dowel this. So I am going to, this is not very large, matter of fact it's damn tiny. So I'm going to try to dowel this, and what I'll probably end up doing is I'll either use I may use a wood dowel, but I might use like a brass pin and put a couple of those in and brass pin it both down inside here and then inside of here, so that instead of using a brad, I'll use a couple brass dowels and then epoxy those in place, and I'll show you that. I'll take you through that process. That's the next repair that I have to do. And then we'll clean this all up as best as we can to make sure that we got a good clean surface for that epoxy to adhere to. One of the things that I need to do, and I mentioned this way early on, is I have to reconstruct these panels, these pointy panels that are decorative to the styling of the stock. What will happen is I am going to mill away a flat on this surface on both sides, and then I'm going to try and get some matching walnut, and then as an applique I'm going to put that walnut down onto that surface and glue it together or epoxy it together. That will then also help to secure this piece to the other piece, so we'll have two things holding it in place. We're going to have, or three things actually. We're going to have the brass dowels, we're going to have the epoxy, and then we'll have that panel that I add over the top of this. When that all dries and gets hard, I'm going to go in and then start reshaping those panels so that they look like the original panels, and that all will help contain or secure those parts together. And that's true for this split over here. We're going to epoxy those together, bring them together, then I'll again mill and put that new panel over the top of that. That'll help to give that an additional glue surface to keep it together. I have this crack that goes right along inside of here. This one's going to be a little more difficult to fix. Again, I'm going to have to spread this open to get some acetone or something down in there to clean all that out. There's still a lot of gunk in here that needs to come out. I'm going to do that. But before I rebuild these panels, or once I've milled it off, I'm going to take and probably run a brass wood screw down in through there to pull these two panels together, with these two parts of the front of this gun stock together. This is all really thick on this side as opposed to this. So I'll drill and countersink this side over here, so that the head of the wood screw actually goes down inside this, and then all of this surface over here, which is the widest, will be the bite surface for the thread of the screws, and then I can pull this together, and that'll reattach or ensure that this gun's not going to want to come apart in the future. So that's the plan for that. That's actually going to be my big project for the next video, or the next part of this restoration. This is where the receiver fits into the gun stock, and it is this location, or this section, that takes up all the recoil from the shotgun going off. So doing a good repair here is going to be essential for this thing to survive into the future. Now, this is a black powder gun. The recoil is generally not all that significant. I don't know if this family's going to shoot this gun again. Probably not, but I want them to be able to do that if they choose to have somebody load up some black powder shells. You know the old story. Everybody says if it's a Damascus barrel, don't use it, don't shoot it. And that is completely true if you're using modern ammunition, that it's not designed to take the pressure of those shells. But there's a huge contingent of people out there that use these black powder guns, use these Damascus guns, and load up black powder shells that mimic closely the pressures that these things were subject to back in the late 1800s. All right, guys, so that's what we're doing next. And make sure you stick around, make sure you come back, make sure you continue to follow this restoration. This one is one of the more interesting ones I've ever done. Again, we're going to be on this for several episodes, so please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.